Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the season finale of Hugging the Cactus, a Mel Gibson podcast. And today we cover Signs. 2002 Signs, written by, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Whatever. Let's just call him Night from now on. Yeah, that has a nicer ring to it. Night. Let's call him Night. Okay, so if you've seen movies by Night before, you know that it is always a hit and miss situation. He either produces something great like The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Glass, or he produces something like The Village, or The Happening, or worst of all, the atrocity known as The Last Airbender. Yeah, what can you do? Night is, well, he's gonna Night. He has his own way of doing things. He starts off every movie with a candle vigil. He always uses the same crew, and they're used to this. They always start with a nice candle celebration and maybe a good cry and maybe a hug, and then everything gets underway. To put it mildly, he's extremely eccentric. But then again, artists, good directors, tend to be eccentric. But he's really on the David Lynch side of being eccentric. Now, back in 2002, his star was shining. He could do no wrong. He was making money hand over fist. He had big budgets thrown at him. Really, no surprise that the producer of this movie is none other than Kathleen Kennedy. Yes, that Kathleen Kennedy. The Kathleen Kennedy who would ultimately take over LucasArts from George Lucas under Disney and completely destroy Star Wars, completely destroy Indiana Jones. If anything, she is the poster girl for woke Hollywood and is everything that's wrong with that place. Yet here she produces the quaint little movie Signs. Budget $72 million. Let that sink in. This woman threw $250 million at the TV show The Acolyte that has since been cancelled and does not look like it's worth $250 million in terms of production value. And really here we have the same situation, because Signs is about a farmhouse and a cornfield. And that's really the extent of the production value. They built a farmhouse and they planted a cornfield. And the cornfield was actually done on agricultural grounds from an agricultural college who actually helped grow the corn. And that cost $72 million. Where did the money go, Kathleen? What elaborate sets did this movie have? I think that they went into town once to buy a book, and Mel went to the vet, which was another house. Production value was lower than Reservoir Dogs. $72 million? Did it all go to Mel? Because you can build a wooden farmhouse for what? In Kentucky for what, $100,000? How much would planting a cornfield cost? Done by an agricultural college? Maybe another couple of grand? Did all the money go to M. Night Shyamalan, Night's usual film crew? Did it all go to James Newton Howard, the score composer? Well, he's worth it. I mean, he did do Pretty Woman and The Fugitive and The Dark Knight. By the way, 8 of M. Night Shyamalan's films. Did I pronounce that correctly? I still don't know. I doubt I can correctly pronounce his name. I am trying to, but I'm afraid I am butchering his name. Hey, what can you do? Now, where did that $72 million go? Maybe it was the advertising budget. They just made a $2 million movie. Maybe they paid Mel Gibson a couple of million. But okay, so they had maybe $65 million in terms of advertising money. That's where the money went. Because nobody cared after this movie came out, because it made a whopping $408 million in its first theatrical run. $408 million. So this thing did over $500 million, basically. What with TV rights and streaming and DVD sales and Blu-ray sales, etc. This movie is a monster. So nobody cared where that $70 million went. They just said, good job, Kathleen. Good job. And gave her LucasArts. Now, if this movie looks and sounds like a Hitchcock movie, that's not really an accident. M. Night even said himself he basically based it on The Birds. There's a lot of Night of the Living Dead that also sort of revolves around a house as a set. Obviously, there are direct connections to War of the Worlds, except War of the Worlds takes you into the destruction of the world and humanity's fight against the invaders, whereas here, that all happens outside. That all happens while they're in a basement somewhere. The aliens have been defeated, except for the one that stayed behind to avenge himself. But that's a later concern. Now the plot, what little of it there is centered around Mel Gibson's character, Graham, who is an ex-pastor, come to find out. He hasn't practiced for 6 months. What happened 6 months ago? His wife died. He blames God. He's lost his faith. Why does he blame God? Well, it's a little unfair to leave him alone with his kids, to have the mother of his children taken away from him. Why? You really start to question why, if there's a plan. This must be some kind of evil plan. This must not be a benevolent God. You know, the typical things people who lose their faith wonder about that kind of stuff, because obviously they still want to believe. It's just life seems so unfair. How can this be completely orchestrated by a just God? So this pastor who has lost his faith because his dead wife was killed by the local vet who fell asleep at the wheel, pinned her as she was walking by the side of the road. Now, that's another thing. Who walks by the side of the road in the United States? It's not smart. We all know this. Drivers are out to kill you when you're walking by the side of the road. I've experienced this personally, recently in fact, when I was in the United States. You don't walk by the side of the road. It's patently unhealthy. And so the pastor's wife's anger should really have been directed at the stupidity of his wife to walk by the side of the road. Why was she there? Not explained, not questioned either. Anyway, we see a man wrestling with his morals, with his faith, with his outlook on life. He's kind of checked out, and his kids know it. He has 2 kids, and his younger brother is more or less taking care of the 3 of them. His younger brother is another piece of work, kind of a failed baseball player, brilliantly played by Joaquin Phoenix, I must say. Arguably, this is even better acting than he did in Joker. The children, the older brother, Morgan, played by a Culkin, specifically Rory Culkin, Macaulay Culkin's younger brother, I think. Not sure. I think he's actually the better actor of the 2. Probably because he's less cute and because all the attention went to Macaulay. I'm pretty sure he never went to Michael Jackson's house. And he has this weird passing resemblance to the kid in Poltergeist. Anyway, the older brother carries the weight of the world, has problems with his father, probably because of the loss of the mother and because the father is checked out. They don't know what to do with him. He takes care of his younger sister. And the movie really starts as Mel Gibson's character, I should say, Graham, wakes up, runs out of his bedroom, runs to his younger brother who falls out of bed. They run outside because they hear noises. What are they hearing? Where are the kids? Well, they're in the cornfield. So they run through the cornfield. This is kind of a weird action sequence, very frantic. So they run through the cornfield, find the kids, and the kids are pointing out something weird. What's happening? Well, in the corn rows, there is a flattened space in the shape of circles, like glyphs, like the ones you see in Peru. Now, if you haven't been to Peru, all over Peru, there are deep indentations in the countryside with candelabras, a spaceman, birds, ants, all kinds of shapes. And they are in all kinds of different sizes. And you have to get into a plane to actually see them. It's really worth going, by the way. So, in this movie, these signs, quote unquote, start popping up all over the planet, starting in this place in Kentucky, but also all over India. Next thing you know, there are lights in the sky, UFOs, all over the major cities. 400 of them, in fact, at some point. Now, despite the $72 million budget, they don't show any of this. This is all exposition dump. This is all explained through a newscast. More or less, like this was a radio show and someone was saying the aliens are invading and this is the war of the worlds. The chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, they said. Well, these aren't actually Martians, at least they're not named that way, but they do suggest that these signs that are in the corn rows are some sort of navigational measurement. Some way the aliens know where to land. They don't go into great detail. They don't have to, because these are just a bunch of farmers with some flattened corn. Obviously, Graham has no faith. Not in God, not in anything that goes bump into the night. So he doesn't really believe any of it. So at some point, there are intruders around the farm. So he automatically assumes, well, it must be the neighbor's kids. So he and his younger brother start chasing these people around, but they're fast. They actually can't find them. They can't even see them. Now, as the days progress, these things keep happening. And at some point, he goes into the corn rows by himself, into his cornfield, and he actually sees an alien leg stepping into the corn. And he freaks out. But he's still skeptical. Yes, he remains skeptical. In fact, it's not even skepticism at this point. That's what people like to say they are. But really, he's in denial. Because it's on the TV. People all over the world are experiencing these things. There's an invasion, an outer space invasion. And of course, the youngest son bought a book when they went to town. They probably do that like once a week, to go to the hardware store, to go to grocery store, and to buy a book. And he bought a book on aliens, and lo and behold, that's that book that tells them everything they need to know to survive this invasion. So they start boarding up the house. As soon as the aliens start walking and tramping around the roof, they get into the basement. It's all really exciting. You don't actually see the aliens, of course. This is much like Jaws, where you don't actually see Jaws until the very end. And then there's the alien reveal. Of course, Graham has already seen the alien, at least a part of him, because he went to the vet. This guy apparently called him at some point. Well, it makes perfect sense that he finally called after 6 months, because, you have to call up the person whose life you ruined at some point. But he never apparently got around to it. Guilt does that to you. But he does call. But he doesn't call to apologize for murdering his wife, pinning her to the tree, where she says her dying few words again to Graham, making him an ex-pastor. No, he calls him because, he's leaving and he's going to the lake because he heard that, aliens don't like water. By the way, don't go into the pantry because I trapped one in there. So, of course, Graham goes into the house and he starts checking out the pantry. At some point, a hand crawls under the door and he chops off a few fingers. And those are obviously alien fingers. And then he runs home and he's finally convinced, yes, there are aliens and they're out to get us. Now, the book says that these aliens are, or at least have bad intent. They are the aliens that, that you're used to from, say, the TV series V. They're not aliens like you would see in, say, Close Encounters of the Third Kind or E.T. No. These are bad aliens. They're just here to eat us. Now, this is an ex-pastor, probably liberal, because this is the only farmhouse that doesn't have a bunch of guns. There are no guns in the house. The closest thing to a weapon in this house is the baseball bat the younger brother has hanging on the wall. And as is foreshadowed, that baseball bat comes into play. But not before Graham has a essential flashback. As the alien left behind by his other aliens with a few fingers missing, that's how we know it was the alien from the pantry coming to avenge himself. As the alien is standing there hovering over poor little Morgan, about to, I don't know, he has some kind of protruding thing from his wrist, and he's about to poison little Morgan so he can eat him afterwards, or perhaps that's how the child becomes palatable, because guess what? The Achilles heel of these aliens is they cannot stand water. It burns them, like holy water does vampires, right? So it burns them. So I was thinking, why would aliens who can be hurt by water go to a water planet where 70%, 80% of the surface is covered in water? Why would you do that? Peculiar. Yet they must be desperate. They must be really hungry. And another thing, how can these aliens actually consume humans who are 65% water? Well, perhaps that stuff he's about to spray into little Morgan has something to do with it. But this is an important plot point. Little Morgan has asthma. Keep that in mind. Now, Graham, played by Mel, has a flashback of the last conversation he had with his wife as she was pinned between a tree and the truck that was rammed into her by the vet. Now, his wife tells him, really semi-conscious and not even completely there, because she doesn't actually recognize him, but she gives a message to her children. Tell Morgan to play games, i.e. not to be serious as a heart attack, because that kid is serious as a heart attack. At the start of the movie, he kills a dog because the dog became feral, which is one of those things that happens to all animals as the aliens start to land. He has to kill the dog to protect his sister. So she tells Graham, tell Bo to listen to her brother. Now, makes perfect sense, because the little brother is basically the father in the family. Because the older brother, or the younger brother of Graham, their uncle, is a little bit of a tool. Graham himself is of course checked out, so little Morgan here is really, well, he takes the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's really the responsible one in the family. Anyway, he's all knocked out and vulnerable, so the father has to step in and do something. And as this flashback progresses, she tells her husband, who she doesn't recognize, tell Graham, and he goes, I'm right here. And she goes, tell him to see, which is aliens exist. You need to handle the situation. You need to see it for what it is. And then she says, tell Meryl to swing away, which is something they would tell him his entire childhood. Anyway, Mel Gibson tells his brother, Meryl, swing away. Meryl doesn't respond at first because he's like, what? And he's like, Meryl, swing away. And then something clicks in Meryl and he grabs his baseball bat and goes to town on the alien. And that's how they win. Isn't that amazing? So, Mel regains his faith because, if there are aliens, there must be a God, right? And if his wife passes on this saintly message, then she must have sacrificed or have been sacrificed to save them as a family. Kind of like Jesus, right? I mean, this is a religious man, so he will obviously recognize these religious motifs in that situation, whether they're realistic or not. But he regains his faith, he dons the old pastor suit again, and that's how basically the movie ends. Well, it's cute, right? It's a M. Night Shyamalan movie. It is what you would expect from it. Not from a $72 million movie that made over $500 million that I had not seen, because this is a Mel Gibson film that I skipped it for two reasons. One, the subject matter. Two, M. Night Shyamalan, because at that point, he really wasn't my cup of tea, and he still isn't. Not really. I appreciate him for his artistry, and he's made some good movies, but there are more misses than hits, so I'm much happier without it. It is not hard to see why Mel Gibson was attracted to this project. He worked really well with M. Night Shyamalan. He actually said that this director managed to challenge him. He was jaded in a lot of ways, and he got more of a performance out of Mel than perhaps Mel would have gotten himself if he had directed this movie. So that's interesting. Joaquin Phoenix was a great addition to the cast. You can see his brilliance. You can really see what an actor he's about to become. Of course, he'd already done several good movies. He's in 8mm with Nicolas Cage, which is really good. And of course, he's in Gladiator. Then there's Rory Culkin, who I think is the younger brother. Yes, he's the younger brother. Now, don't blink, but he's also in Scream 4, and he is in Bullet to the Head with Sylvester Stallone. So that's an interesting crossover. Now, in this season, I've covered mostly odd parts done by Mel Gibson. To be fair, I did that because, well, I hadn't podcasted in a while, and I just wanted to get my footing again, and also because I was starting up the whole YouTube adventure. Well, I won't say I wanted to waste it, but I wanted to get my sea legs before I hit on the major movies to be covered on YouTube. Now, next season, you're in for some big surprises. I'm going to be covering some big ones again, and they will be done in audio as well as video. So I hope you will stay tuned for that. I'm going to continue working as of now. I'm going to start on the next season as this season ends. So stay tuned, and bye for now.